Hello, get ready for a great show.
Black space is a place for us.
Real people with real issues.
Discussing real topics.
Black space.
A safe space for our community.
Hello, I'm George Middleton, your host this evening on this podcast episode of Black Space Live. For the topic of our discussion today, we're going to examine the question, how do we bridge the gap between the Black man and the Black woman? Before we get started, I would like to take this time to briefly encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. In other words, don't be selfish with this content. Share the love. You can catch Black Space Live on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Spotify. And you may also catch us on Anchor FM, Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. We are a team of two this evening, and we had another guest, and our thoughts and prayers are with our missing guest who will not be able to attend due to an unexpected loss in the family. So prayers to you. And we know that your brain and thoughts are here in spirit. So hopefully we'll be able to access that during the spirit of your thinking during this conversation. But we still have, it's probably good for me because it's hard to handle. One, two is definitely, I'll be outmatched, and I'm probably still outmatched with the remaining intelligent and beautiful panelist, Miss Desi. Good evening, Desi.
Good evening. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great.
So I'm not going to worry with introductions because everybody knows you now. I think you're a rock star at this point. And I have to say, I said it'd be in backstage, but the look is amazing.
Thank you.
So what, you have some modeling contracts coming up? What's going on? Tell me what's going on with this look. This is not just your average regular look. What's going on here?
I love this look. You know, it was my birthday look. If you guys watched the show that I was last time, you know that this was my birthday look, and I'm just working on branding juvenolive.com.
Okay.
I've been doing a lot of content on YouTube for anxiety management, actually, and also the normal home decor content that I do.
Amazing. Well, you clearly you must be highly successful in your endeavor because that's amazing.
Thank you. It's going pretty good.
All right. Okay. So, had a really interesting discussion a couple of podcasts ago. This is kind of like part 2 of this discussion. And I thought the dynamics were just really interesting in terms of bridging the gap between the quote unquote Black male and the Black female. And I realized that the discussion itself, the podcast itself, was an excellent example of such a gap. We had a very intelligent cast and panelists, very accomplished, very esteemed, knowledgeable, familiar with, the effectiveness of research, facts, and, so we had a really, really quality level panel, which made the my observation more, it made it more stark, because here you have these intelligent people talking about how we're going to assess the gap, and there was a gap between us.
Right.
And I thought that was just amazing. And it was very perplexing. And afterwards, it opened up my eyes. You know, my producer, he's really been beating this drum for a while. Um, and uh, and um, and he'd been trying to, he kind of, was tactfully saying to me, George, you're too soft.
Oh.
Don't pander. Get to the real. Don't give him any slack. Don't give him any break. And I'm Mr. I try to, for purposes of credibility for the show, I try to stay as objective as possible, because I want all sides to come out, and I want the discussion to include everybody, because I believe the issues are very serious, and they need to have all of the perspectives addressed. But at the same time, sometimes because I'm a man as well,
Right.
I've got points of view too. And so that last podcast, I had told the panelists that, hey, since we don't have men here to represent the male side, I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to represent the male side. And not so much whether or not I agree with the male side, but I'm going to give the male perspective. But a lot of it, what I said, I could resonate with from a male perspective. So that's what I did. So I ended up being less facilitative, and I interacted more as if I were one of the panelists, giving my perspective as a male.
Okay.
And so, it made for some interesting conversational dynamics. And in doing so, I could just really see this gap widening. It wasn't closing in, it was widening.
Wow.
And then after the show, we had later conversation in the chat room, and it got wider. It got wider. So it was just really interesting dynamics. And, I just thought how ironic, or how, I still can't find the right word. But if we're talking about the gap between the black man and the black woman,
Right.
and here I am, subject matter expert, and in this particular area, this is the stuff that I study. So I come from an objective, research, evidence-based perspective. I don't come from personal opinion when I'm in these conversations, because everybody has an opinion. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we're trying to move forward. You can't move forward on opinions. You have to move, you need that objective criteria with which to make good decisions on after you assess it. But I felt like I'm giving you the perspective of the black male, and we're talking about bridging the gap of the black male. And it felt like the perspective was dismissed.
But what aspect of the gender gap was it that?
Well, we're gonna get into that. I'm just giving you.
Okay.
I'm setting up the conversation right now just by giving you my experience, and so I'm just speaking from my experience as a black male. Now, I also have to say that I didn't dismiss any of their perspectives, because in many ways their perspectives were in alignment with my point of view. But it seemed like it was a one way. It wasn't a two way. It wasn't a reciprocal discussion. It was like, here's my perspective, and I'm like, I hear your perspective, and I see that, and here's the male contribution to this dynamic, and that was not easily received, and it just kept widening and widening and widening. So to your question, I put together some questions just to kind of really ferret this out some more. And I'll also add this too. I was in some social situations after this show, And there's one particular, I was at a cigar bar and met some very successful African American women. Uh, and we were just having a great time, good discussion. But eventually, when you're in a cigar bar, I don't know if you're a cigar aficionado or not, Desi, but you never can have a bad conversation in a cigar bar. It's always productive. It's always thought provoking, cool. Nobody ever gets in fights and stuff like that. It's just chill. And this discussion came up about men and the lack of the quality men that women at this level are looking for. And I said, wow, I just had a podcast discussion about this. And, I said, that's really interesting that you all are bringing this up. And I said, and I just asked questions that's kind of similar to what I asked in the podcast. First question being, do you all understand that the Black male, the African male, has been historically and currently under systemic attack? And it was like, oh, yeah. It was kind of a half-hearted, yeah, I kind of see that. But they didn't really want to give it the credit that statistics show. I mean, this is not opinion. This is statistically proven, demonstrated. They didn't want to give that statistical aspect credit. It's like, I ain't got time to worry about, he's got to get it together. And, I'm at a point in my life where I got to, and, so I said, wow, this is really blowing my mind right now. Because with this current way of thinking, the gap is not going to close. Mm-hmm. So what I want to do is let me just start with the most basic of the questions. And Desi, I don't mean to make you the voice of all Black women on the show, but
sure
it looks like
Black women will not agree with me.
it looks like you're it.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going in. We're going in. All right. So, Desi.
Yes.
How would you describe the divide between the Black male and female, and what is responsible for it if you see it?
I think that the divide between the Black male and the Black female is related to understanding either innately or socially, men understanding what women expect from men, from what women expect from men, and vice versa. Women understanding what men expect from women. And so, to the question that you asked the ladies in the cigar bar, mm-hmm, about, do you understand that Black men are under and have been under this systematic pressure and what do you call
it? Systemic attack.
Yes,
systemic attack. Yes.
I believe that there's a point of misunderstanding with men, because as a woman, or for myself and a lot of the women that I know, we are raised to see men as this protector, this provider person that is supposed to be in our lives. And so when you come to the situation where a man tells you, hey, do you realize that I'm under attack? Right or wrong, from a woman's point of view, it kind of comes off as, well, you are supposed to be under attack. You're a man. Men are supposed to be, back in the historic days, they're fighting, they're overthrowing one another, they are overpowering one another. So as a woman, be it nature or nurture, we have this feeling that, okay, well, that's what men do. So a man shouldn't be saying that he's under attack, because a man should be expecting to be under attack. And if he's a good man, he should be expecting to prevail in that attack. So I think that kind of misunderstanding is what widens the gap, because it seems like when men say, hey, I'm under this systematic attack, and you're acting like you don't see it, women come back and it sounds harsh and they say, well, okay, well, you need to get over that attack. It's not, it isn't as harsh as it sounds, but it's just our mind frame and the way that we're raised to think that men actually think, or how men should actually act, which is if somebody attacks you, you're supposed to be attacking them back, not coming over to me and saying, hey, that person attacked me.
I really appreciate uh, the way that you explain that and the honesty in which you explain that. So let me just let's drill down into that rationale. You said misunderstanding. Who's doing the misunderstanding when it comes to this question of historical and current day social and systemic attack on the African male? Where's the misunderstanding?
I think the misunderstanding is on both sides,
Okay, so
because
break that out for me.
um, women have no idea how much a man feels like it's too much. So, if, for instance, my husband, he works in the trees, and sometimes he will be gone all day with guys cutting down trees. And to me, I don't think anything of it. I'm thinking, okay, well, he's a fit guy. That's what he does. But he'll come home sometimes and say, well, I have to figure out a way to get more people working for me so that I don't ever have to actually do the physical labor, because I'm getting older and I can't take that. To me, he looks like this huge fit guy. I never think that he can't do anything because he looks big and fit to me. So that's a misunderstanding, and that goes across men's physical strength, their mental strength, how they can compete with other races in society, and how they feel about that. And then also, coming from the side of men, I don't think that they actually realize that women have these high expectations of them to be able to kind of just do anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, okay, very good. With let's take both sides. Let's start with the woman's side. And everything you're saying is very plausible. I don't find anything illogical so far in your explanation. With the misunderstanding on the woman's side, what is your understanding on the historical and current systemic attack of the African American / black male? And this isn't a test, so don't feel like you have to say everything right. I'm not putting it that way. Just be honest. It's okay. You're not going to be blamed or judged for your answers. Just what is your understanding of the historical and current systemic attack on the African male?
My father died at an early age when I was about 12 years old, and before that, he had divorced my mom. So I really didn't grow up with a male figure besides my older brother, who was also about 14 years older than me. So by the time I actually started to become older, he was already long gone from our home. So I don't really have that much. I don't really have that much knowledge about the systemic problems that Black men face, and the only ones that I hear would have been from my husband.
Hmm.
Um, he's not that type of person that kind of complains about the systemic issues that Black men have to face, although I do obviously know that he faces them. And so I think again, it comes just down to communication. Like, I don't know, like, from my point of view, growing up the way that I did kind of around women, um, my idea would just be that, like I'm stating, that typical, okay, this group in society wants you down, you don't want to be down, you should be doing everything you can to overcome that group. And if you're not doing that as a man, then you're
Hmm.
being less than a man.
Right.
So in many ways, it's obvious that the systemic attacks exist, but because we live in a patriarchy, the only persons that we can blame for the downfall in our community and why our community isn't being uplifted is going to be the highest layer of that patriarchy, which is the man.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So on that aspect, let me give you a couple of points, perspectives to consider to integrate into your current way of viewing historical and current systemic attacks on the African male. Um, your first point about a man just being able to handle everybody's under attack. Everybody's under attack. It's called competition, right?
Right.
We're on an economic playing field and we're competing. So it's a full contact sport. You're expected to take some hits and give some hits. There's rules to the game. You're supposed to try to play within the expected standards and rules. So yeah, you get in there, you mix it up, throw some elbows. You do some networking. You find alliances, find your tribe. Create those networking situations to your advantage. That is all things being equal. All things being equal, that's the lay of the land. The historical nature of the experience for the African male, though, is all things being unequal. Systemic, statistical fact, plain and simple. This is about just mathematics. It's not about values or character or anything like that. This is a numbers thing that we're talking about. And from a mathematical, historical, statistical standpoint, the system was designed to have the African male begin with less numerically. There's a speech from Dr. Martin Luther King where he said, it's one thing to ask a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps, but it's another thing when the man you're asking has no boots. It's a very powerful metaphor. And, he gave the ultimate sacrifice for our economic advantage and our social equality and freedom. He gave the ultimate sacrifice. And toward the end, he went through a litany. I wish I could play this speech on here. He went through a factual-based litany of economic advantages given to the racially white population and denied from the racially black population. These aren't excuses. These are just historic, numerical, statistical facts that advantage one and disadvantage the other, which has generational impacts. So, as much as you can have generational accumulation of wealth, you can also have generational accumulation of poverty.
Right.
They're
And
they're both equal, and again, these are statistical based, historically documented facts.
right. And as much as I realize that within our current world that we live in, that our playing field, our battlefield currently is economic. I don't think that I don't think that in the minds of women that kind of puts aside the point that before the playing field was economic, it really was a real war zone. And even now in Russia, the Middle East, other countries, it's a literal war zone and it's a power grab. And I think a lot of Black women come from a place that is like, okay, well, what's with why is Russia over here doing a power grab? United States represented by the white Anglo and Russia represented by that white segment, and even over in African countries, they're grabbing at the power right now. It's a race, a technology race. I think the question is, okay, when are Black men going to be jumping into that kind of power grab and that race, and not saying, hey, but we started a million miles back, so we'll never have the newest AI, or these people are keeping us from creating it. I was just watching a documentary on delivery drones, and over in Africa, they already have this robust program completely run by people of color with sending life-saving blood through these drones through the air, working 24/7. People of color are in this race. They were in the wars in the past, and they're in the race for technology now. And Black American men, for some reason, seem to be kind of sitting it out on the side with this idea that, hey, well, we started so far behind, so we'll never catch up. And I just think it's not cutting it anymore with Black women. I mean, it just sounds like a big excuse. And I get it. I get coming from a place of being the underdog. But now what? I think that's the question. Like, okay, you were the underdog. You've been freedom fighters. Like you said, Dr. King died for this integration. How long are our counterpart as African American women are going to keep continuing to say that they're the underdog in this situation? How long does that last?
I love your questions, and especially the question of now. What about now? What are you going to do about now? Really relevant question. Here's where the challenge is for the African woman, though, to understand. When you equate conflicts like Russia and Ukraine or any other cultural conflict, you're comparing it to an apple to an orange when you compare it to the experience of the African male brought to America. That was not a cultural conflict. That was not a cultural war. That was a colonialist takeover, which was accompanied by abuse, violence, rape, dismemberment, trauma, torture. Not just a war where two sides are going at it and may the best man win. And then as a result, you had, this began, and I'm not going to take you through a history lesson, but I encourage you and the listeners to go back and Google the carving of Africa. And it'll tell you the historical a recount of all of the European countries getting together intentionally to descend on Africa, carve it up, and exploit it for its resources, including its people. It's had generational, and still is occurring, which most people don't understand. So when you're comparing these other cultural conflicts, it gives it you're using the wrong format to make your assessment to effectively answer the most important question: what about now? How long do we have to wait? When are you going to get it together? The first step to getting it together to be able to effectively answer that question is you have to have an accurate assessment on the problem. If you don't have an accurate assessment on the problem, you're going to experience a cognitive dissonance because you're going to be using the wrong standard of measurement to use in observing your male counterpart. So even though your rationale is about 80% correct, the 20% is off because you're using an incorrect comparison to judge the performance of the male in our community by. The racial conflict is nothing compared to the cultural conflict that you're talking about. We're not dealing with cultural conflict. We're dealing with a racial paradigm which has been systemized. Russia has no systemic impact over Ukraine and vice versa. So that's two equal, culturally intact groups that are fighting together, and they're not having the strife inside their culture with the male and female because they're all united. The Ukraine male and females are united, and the Russian male and females are united. And so let the best man win. That is not our situation. How does that hit you?
Right. That's not our situation. Yeah, it hits me in this way. I am hyper aware of the things that our forefathers had to endure and um, go through, and during the civil rights, slavery, and then the civil rights, and even now today to fight in a peaceful way for our humanity. And I respect Black men for their peaceable protests and their peaceful way of doing things. I respect that. But on a grander scale, for Black men to have been through all of those things, and then we still have a nation of people in America today, many of which are successful in accomplishing things, having tore down the laws that were built to keep them down. And I see that as more of a badge of honor than a reason to keep belittling yourself and saying, oh, but we weren't there yet. Like that, what the Black man and woman, but more so the Black man before women even had rights, did in America for African American people is a huge accomplishment. This
Yes.
is so strange because I was having like a kind of a premonition yesterday when I was giving my son a bath, and he was just sitting there playing with his dinosaurs, and I just thought, I think he's so cute, So I was like, oh, while he's so cute and he just is lovely having his lovely time in the bath. And I was just thinking like there was a time when a little boy like him just wouldn't be seen the way that he is in America today. He would be seen as just slob or anything, and not the way that he's received in this country. when I walk down the street with him, he's a charmer, so he's always got tons of people, all the babies. He's 4 years old, but they love him to death. They're just, you know, and I'm grateful for that. So for me, to hear a man saying that we started so far behind, it's like, wow, you guys started beneath the dirt as slaves, and now so many of you are millionaires and billionaires, but you're kind of, instead of putting that history on a pedestal, you're kind of trying to keep internalizing it and saying that it's some reason that you're less than. That's just the way that I see it. I don't understand this internalizing this idea of being less than.
Mhm. You're hitting all the major points. So that gets over to the male side of the misunderstanding. Everything you just said gets over to the male side of the misunderstanding. And you use the word internalization. Very powerful. Um, Here's where the African male is misunderstanding the situation. We understand collectively. We understand that we're under attack. We understand that we are the first to be perceived in the most negative. That we understand that we're going to receive the harshest response, the harshest punishment, the harshest discipline. We live that, so we understand that. What we've done historically and even current day is we've tried to make this thing called black equal to white.
Mm-hmm.
That's not working. It's just not working. But we double, triple, and quadruple down on demanding recognition from the power, the perceived power structure, that we be treated equally as you. So a prime example, current day, that shows this is what's going on in Florida. Governor DeSantis has got the anti-woke bill and the book banning bill and the African American curriculum dilution bill. Now, here's a guy who's racially identifies as white, making qualitative decisions for the educational experience of a racial group, black. And he's doing it because he can do it. Right or wrong, agree or disagree, it's irrelevant. He can do it, he is doing it, and it is working, and it is going to sweep across the country because he can do that.
Right.
Okay. Now I'm looking at the African American community's experience. What are we doing? We're getting mad. We're protesting. We're doing marches, demanding that he stop doing that. How dare you do that? You got Al Sharpton, who I respect in many ways. I disagree with him in other ways, but I respect him for his experience and his commitment. But his method is not working. This
Well,
we're gonna keep fighting, and we're not gonna back down, and we're gonna show you. No, you're not, because power. When you're in power, you don't really care. I don't care if you're mad.
and George, not to cut you off, but this is my question about it. I live in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Where is all of this education that we as Black or African American people are getting? Where is it going? I saw so many people online, um, like you said, getting mad, protesting, completely upset what's going on in Florida.
Mhm.
And now even me myself, I haven't read this curriculum, but where are the people that look like you and I that are going to come out and say, hey, I read this curriculum, or we as a group read this curriculum from beginning to end, and it should be in there.
Right.
Not just, oh, well, it was influenced by this person. Governor DeSantis is saying that. One
Right.
thing that I did hear him say was that this curriculum is filled with all this queer theory that kind of insinuates that Black people are the leaders in this kind of LGBTQ,
Mhm.
that's where that all
Right.
came from,
Right.
was the African American
Right.
community. And
Right.
when I heard that, I don't know the curriculum, but
Mhm.
when I heard that, the first thing I said was what I'm saying to you. Well, who's Black that has read this thing?
Right. Right.
Because don't just ask me to say no to DeSantis if you don't even know what's in the book yourself.
Right.
What is in the book?
Yeah.
Are they trying to lace the book with a false history about us,
Mhm.
or the curriculum?
Yeah.
Nobody knows, because everybody, African American women are so educated, everybody's so educated, but nobody's taking on the social causes at all. Nothing whatsoever. Nobody admits that Black people in America have different political ideologies.
Mhm.
Not all Black people have democratic ideologies, but we're expected to come together as one no matter what, and just support the same thing just because we're of a certain color.
Well, in the racial game, the racially white population has different ideologies too.
Exactly.
However, here's the thing. What we don't realize is that they still come together in the areas where it counts.
Well, of course
Because
it is
no, no,
where.
no, no, no. I'm saying something a little different here,
Okay.
particularly to race.
Mhm.
Race is the adhesive to this context. And what people don't realize is that race is not a genetic or scientifically valid concept. Race itself is an ideology. What we do as quote unquote Black people is we're dealing at it as if it is a genetic and cultural
Mm.
concept.
Mhm.
That's our first mistake. And
That's true.
that's our first mistake. And because of that, once we accept the designation of Black, we have now accepted a position with no leverage, no influence, and no power. All we can do is respond and react. And that's why you don't see those quote unquote Black teachers, Black leaders in education standing out doing the things you're saying, because they're not equipped to do that. They don't have the language to do it. I'm studying this. This is my area of expertise. So I'm coming from a very evidence-based process here. It's not an opinion. The fact is that if you identify as Black, you're using a language that is not going to work for you. The white identity first of all, it is designed to have the power because race is about white supremacy. And white supremacy is not some emotionally loaded meaning term. It just means hierarchy,
Right.
supreme at the top. Black is always inferior. That's what race is designed for. It's a social status of hierarchy. And so no matter what you do, the one thing that unites anybody of white identity is that they maintain that status quo. You can have a left-wing ideology, you can have a right-wing ideology, you can have all other type of ideologies. But if you identify as white, the one thing that every person of white identity will come together on is maintaining status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a good thing, not a bad thing. It just is an
It
is
just
thing.
is what it is.
And so we, as the Black population, until we start understanding that that's what this is about, our responses will always be ineffective. Because once you understand that, then you realize the ineffectiveness of protesting against a group who's designed by its very ideological nature to be supreme. And what we're trying to do is we're down here saying, make us here. Number one, real men and real power doesn't ask you to be up here.
Exactly.
Real men and real power says, I'm not going to beg you to teach my kids. Thanks for telling me that you don't want to teach my kids. I'm going to go elsewhere. So see ya. Bye. I'm not going to waste my time marching, protesting. Now that you're honest and telling me that you don't want to teach my kids what they need to know, I'll take it from here. Thank you very much. And I'm out. I'm not going to fight with you. I'm not going to beg you to teach my kids. But I think that way because I've done the work to deconstruct the social construct of race from my thinking. When you think in racial terms, one of my cliches is racial thinking will always and only get racial outcomes. Only. And the racial outcomes always maintain white supremacy. Statistics support that. There's nowhere in this country, albeit in the world, but just with America, where race and equality coexist. Nowhere. Nowhere. And so we keep trying to make it be integrated. You can't take a tool of division, an ideology of division, and try to merge it with an ideology of inclusiveness and equality.
Right.
And there's the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
So as the Black male, and it doesn't matter what level of socioeconomic status, how many degrees he has, the primary identity of Black is a limiter. Now, consciously achieved quality African men who have made a lot out of their lives doing well, they'll disagree initially. They'll say, well, I'm equal as anyone else. But the statistics don't support that belief. The statistics show that regardless of your level of socioeconomic attainment, that your white counterpart, who's probably lesser talented than you, is getting more for less than you are. This is statistically speaking. So it's one thing to consciously say, I'm equal and I'm as much of a man as you are. But then let's look at the proof is in the pudding in terms of the end of the year analysis and all these systemic areas of service. Someone on here, this is a great Provision House in the comments asks, is race a method of gaslighting? Yes. Yes. Thank you for that question. That's the problem. And so it's gaslighting as it pertains to this discussion of the gap between the Black male and the Black female. This discussion is a result of being gaslit. And again, when I'm talking about these things, it's not to be blaming or finger pointing or saying how stupid or how smart, but the belief of our current situation is dictated on a foundation of irrationality. And so this really gets down to, and again, Desi, I really appreciate just your straightforward, hey, here's how I see it. Here's the average perspective of the Black female. I mean, your answers so far have just been really illuminating. And it's easy for people to say, well, you're wrong. You don't care. And you're just this arrogant black, don't care. You disrespect a black man, all that. It's good for ratings and gets people all excited and people want to tune in to see the car wreck. But, this is a thinking man's game, and we are being psychologically manipulated. And when you think about it from a cultural standpoint, and just from a parent standpoint, there's no justification. There's no room in our families and in our community to allow anything to come inside and divide us.
Exactly.
So when that thing comes in and divide us, we don't attack each other for being divided. We need to attack what's dividing us. But because we're being gaslit, we're attacking each other.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts so far on that?
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I'm just sitting here trying to take it all in, what you're saying and what we're talking about, because I definitely agree with that. But my biggest concern is when I interact with people, especially across social media, I find that um, people of the Caucasian race, they seem to, like you said, have this, whether rich or poor, they have this combined unified purpose or manifest destiny that they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we find that pride in ourselves
Right.
as a whole
Yes.
to actually feel like we have a combined destiny? Because
Yes.
when you're online, like, everybody's morals, everybody's beliefs are here, there, everywhere, and then the going thing is like, well, you just do you, but that can't be. Everybody can't. I mean, it can be, but we see where it's getting us.
Mm-hmm.
You just do you. Don't talk about it. The way another person's raising their children. You see
Mm-hmm.
kids using profanity on the internet, little babies, toddlers, and all of the comment section. It's like, don't talk about the way that person is raising their child. That's their child.
Right.
So the commonality in us and in our community, it just does not exist.
Yes. God, Desi, you're knocking out the park with your questions today. Love it. I love it. Because again, I didn't expect this conversation to go this direction, but this is my work.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you're saying, this is the work that I do. The beginning answer to your question is that under our current thinking, specific to the African community, but this applies to the white community as well. Under our current thinking, what you just asked will not ever occur. It will not happen. It is the definition of insanity right now to think that without making some type of change to continue as we are, that things will just come to the point that you're asking. That is the hardest. That's the plus and the minus, because understanding that we need to change our mindset is totally different from actually changing
Right.
your mindset. And the reason that is because we've gotten here through years and generations of repetition. And repetition is the best tool for anything you want to be good at. What is that about? If you want to become expert, practice something so many hours.
Mm-hmm.
The human body is an amazing machine. You do something enough times and it just takes over its own and it just starts doing it for you. And that's because it takes all of that information that new information you've learned and begins to store it in your subconscious. But it can only do that after repetition. And, we are subconsciously gaslit. So how do you ungaslight yourself? The challenge for the Black community, and this is the work again that I do, is that our current thinking is racial. And I know we all mean well when we say Black this and Black that, and I understand why it comes from that because historically we've been stripped from our culture. But what we've done is we have internalized, to get to another word that you brought up, we have internalized the Europeans' version of who he sees us as. And so even though there's a work, I'll quote from the work of Dr. Audrey Smedley. She is a world-renowned African-American anthropologist. And I'll quote one of her passages. In the 1860s, when slavery ended, the practice of using race as social status and the basis of our human identities remained. This is a very powerful passage, because if you're a critical thinker, that's going to start sending you on a matrix of what those implications are of that passage. In 1860, when slavery ended, though the practice of slavery ended, the practice of using race as social status and the basis of our human identities remained. So there's so many implications there.
Right.
That means prior to slavery, race was not used as social status. Race was not used as the basis of our human identities. And most people don't make that connection. That race had a beginning. It just hasn't had an ending yet, because we have not made the cultural change. We have not returned to our cultural origins. Now, it may seem this passage may seem totally unrelated to our current day plight, but I guarantee you, it's the fact that we continue to practice an ideology of social status that keeps us in the current status we're in. And the only way for us as a Black community to come up here is to leave and return to who you authentically are. Now, what I'm saying is crazy. It's crazy to a lot of people when I say this, so I understand how most people are going to receive me. But just check the statistics.
Yeah, but how? I mean, it seems like to me that you're saying basically, and I agree with this to a certain extent, is that because of this race ideology, we're in effect born into a caste system, which is you're just of the lower caste because you're born this way. And we're accepting that because that's what we're born into, and that's what is being. But how does a person leave that and become what they were meant to be, as you say?
The intervention that I use is called racial deconstruction. So it's nothing fancy. It's pretty straightforward, because race is a social construct. So the reverse of that is to deconstruct it. And my process is a threefold method of, first, you have to be educated. You have to be objectively educated, factually educated about what race actually is. Then you have to do a process of self-reflection to identify the racial thinking within your own mindset. And then you have to apply the outcomes of the first two stages in order to move yourself into the direction that you're trying to move to. And my approach is more designed at leaders of systems, because most individuals, if I go to the average individual, they're too busy.
Right. And this is what I'm thinking, the average, if you didn't have an entire ecosystem of people doing that same work, really, what good would it be for one person to do
Right.
this construction
Right.
therapy and then go back into a world that is
That reinforces exactly.
exactly
And that's why I'm doing this work from a systemic process. Because this is not a one man job. But ideas are powerful. And since COVID-19 and George Floyd, there's a shift in the air of consciousness. People are looking for, how do we change our trajectory? How do we improve our situation? And this is the opportune time. Right now, 2023 is the opportune time to take advantage of changing the paradigm of thought to move forward. Because there's no way in 2023 that we should be having the same racial strifes that we're having.
not internally, with one another. No.
With one another and as a country.
Right.
One of my workbooks is titled, "Can You Be American and a Color Too?" It's a cognitive-based question to get the reader and participant to examine, what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be Black? What does it mean to be white? And are they aligned? Are the values of being American aligned with the values of being Black? Are the values of being Black aligned with the values of being white? Now, here's the question. Here's another question to that. If all of those are in alignment, then why do you need the division of color? Won't one of those labels do?
Right. It
So,
does in every other country, it seems.
we're doing it to ourselves.
Mhm.
We socially practice an ideology of division, and then wonder why we're having all this internal strife. We're doing it to ourselves. But it has to happen systemic. I always say systemic issues require systemic solutions. One person is not going to do it. We need leaders of systems to start aggressively changing the paradigm of thought as to how we are giving services, providing services to our community. Okay, so I had a lot more questions. It's 9:14. Desi, you're amazing.
Thank
You're
you.
amazing. This has been a great discussion. I'm sure the producer was probably looking for a lot more fireworks. He's probably going to get on me at the end of the show saying, "George, you gave her a pass. You let her off."
That's a nice guy.
But your answers were very authentic, and you really explained the mindset of today's successful African woman. And I don't blame you for your mindset, because as Provision House stated, we all are being gaslit by race. And the reason we're thinking this way is because of the ideology that we have internalized. And some old wise person said, when it comes to problems, always attack the problem, not the person.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to bridge the gap between the African male and African female, we're not going to bridge it if we're attacking each other for the way we think.
This is true.
It's just not going to be bridged. Let's see. Provision House said one other thing. Some race and equality seems to be an acceptable concept when it comes to the same supreme race by those that are not of that supreme race. That's self-defeating in a way, right? Same race and equality seems to be an acceptable concept when it comes to the same supreme race by those that are not of that supreme race. That's a layered question. That's self-defeating in a way. I'm going to have to study that question more, but I would have to, on its face value of your question, agree with you that we are in a self-defeating mindset, especially as it pertains to the Black male. For all the things that Desi has pointed out, as she's asking the question, How long do we have to wait? When are you going to just man up and do man stuff? Because that's my idea of a man. When is it going to happen? And my answer to that, to all the African men, is that as long as you think racially, you're as hard as you try, it's not going to happen. As long as we are, I'll quote one other thing. Let me put this theme music on because I'm supposed to be getting out of here, and I'm holding Desi over, and this can go all night.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, this can go all night. But let me say this. I'm gonna close with this. Dr. Claude Anderson, Powernomics. He defines the definition of community as this. A community is one that can get all of its needs met, at least 90 to 95% of its needs met within its community before it goes outside of it for its needs. The African American community is the only community that it's flipped. We get 90 to 95% of our needs met from outside our community. Education, employment, housing, business startups, you name the service, we're usually dependent on those outside of our community who don't look like us to provide it for us. And now Governor DeSantis is getting ready to close one of those down. And it's going to sweep the country. I'm telling you, what he started, it's working, and it's going to sweep the country because he can. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. It doesn't matter if it's rational. It doesn't matter if you agree with it or if you disagree with it. It's happening. So we are dependent upon those outside of our groups that think like Governor DeSantis to provide us service. That's bad math, man. And I'm tired of begging. I don't beg. So, African American men, you're going to have to change your current way of thinking. Racial thinking, and African American women. Because here's the thing, I'm going to put this back on the women. Here's the thing. If you African American woman, your first instinctive reaction is to support your man. Not to question your man, not to be in doubt of his existence or experiences, not to question whether he's making excuses. It should be instinctive. An attack on the man is an attack on you. So you should be taking this personal. You should be very knowledgeable about what's happening to the black male, because that is a direct attack on you. But because we're gaslit, the average African American woman will say, well, something's wrong with that man. Why doesn't he get it together? And we as men need the emotional and physical support of our female counterpart. That's where our strength is. Culturally, the African male and female united is a power that cannot be matched. Every other culture group understands this except us. So, we've got to flip the script. Any parting words before we leave? Desi?
Yeah, sure. I completely agree. And I agree with what you're saying wholeheartedly. That African American women, so to speak, African American, I know you don't like that term, but African American women should not, as you already stated during this conversation, lash out on men. That's just not where your anger should lie. Amen. And I know it seems so easy because even when it comes to our children, our spouse, just the people closest to us, we always kind of want to relate them to the bad things that are happening in our lives. And we have to get out of that idea that our internal structure, our homes, our kids, our mates, those are the people that are holding us back. Because that's not true. It's all a fallacy. It's not true whatsoever. And that is one step, one easy step towards closing that divide.
Amen. Amen. Well said. Desi, as usual, it's always an experience with you.
Same here, same with you.
Let's see. We had a couple other people. We had Negus Afro Anadol. I'm probably messing the name up. But Negus says Cynthia is right. Black men, Cynthia, she must be. Who's Cynthia? Cynthia is right. Black men of Denmark only marry and date white girls, even in Scandinavia. Okay. Then Negus says black male pathology is not only USA black men. Agreed. Negus then says Somali Muslim male raped Danish drag queen last week in gay cruising park. Interesting. And then Negus says, "You need to stop lying." I wonder who is that towards. And then lastly, Negus says, "I am Eritrean Afro-Dane." Is that a cultural designation? I'm not sure.
Eritrean.
Eritrean. Thank you. Okay, I am Eritrean Afro-Dane. Okay. Well, thank you for those comments. Whiteness is what they want to be with. I wonder who's what they want to be with.
I think probably black men.
Interesting. Okay.
Right.
I encourage all of you who are watching this and putting in comments that continue the conversation after this is done. Get on the comment section and add that in, because we follow up and we engage with the conversations afterwards. So anyway, Negus is on the road. She's going now, or he's going. Anyway, it's been a great show. Thank you, Desi, as always, for your brain power, your intellect, and your beauty.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes. And to the rest of you, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Have a great week. And until the next time we meet, we will see you in the black space.